Jayom Vishnupad Paramahansa Hari Vajagacharya Astatarasatasi Simad His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Gaura Premanandi. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. This morning we're going to complete chapter 4, summary, or the flow of the activities found in this section, final section. As you see, it's class number 10. Look like we're not going to complete all 6 cantos, but we'll get close. What we heard the day before yesterday was the story of Dhruva. At the end of the story of Dhruva, yesterday we heard that Narada was really happy, feeling very fortunate to have such a qualified disciple as Dhruva. And he went to a place where the Prachetas were performing a yajna and offered some glorification of Dhruva at that yajna. So that's at the end of chapter 12 of Canto 4. And chapter 13 begins where Vidura says, who are the Prachetas? In what lineage do they come? And tell me something about the yajna they were doing. To oblige Vidura's question, Maitreya goes back to give the lineage. And he says they come in the lineage of Dhruva. And from the lineage of Dhruva comes Prithu, and he gives that lineage. So the life of Prithu and his queen, and their activities and so forth and so on, and his interaction with earth, because the prior king, King Vena, was a really wicked person, and so earth was withholding. In fact, earth had hidden the seeds that produce necessities for human society. So many things happened, and earth then supplied all those things to Prithu. And then we heard that Prithu, at the end of his rule, turned the kingdom over to his sons, and there was one leading son and 4 other sons in 4 directions. And Vaikuntha Vimana descended, and he went to the spiritual realm. And now the Prachetas, it turns out they're in that line from Prithu and Prithu's descendants and so on. So that's where we are. The Prachetas were sons of King Prachini Bari. This is important, it's a detail. But Narada had been the spiritual master for everybody in that line, from Swayambhuva Manu down, Dhruva and Uttanapada and everybody. There was one that was remaining that kind of got a little distracted from the path of bhakti. He became too much absorbed in fruitive activities, the karmakanda portion of the Vedas, King Prachini Bari. And his sons were the Prachetas, so he's going to narrate an allegory that puts an end to King Prachinibhari's attachments, and he will end this session with he also achieves spiritual perfection. He doesn't just become detached, he achieves spiritual perfection by the grace of Narada. Narada is really expert at helping people get unstuck. So we'll hear this very interesting allegory, but before we hear that allegory, we're going to see what Narada, the interactions that Narada had with the Prachetas. The Prachetas are his sons, King Prachinibhari's sons. And again, they're in the line from Swayambhuva Manu through Uttanapada and Dhruva and Ritu and so forth. Same family lineage. So let's see what happens with Narada's interactions with the Prachetas. Here's a quick summary. When the 10 Prachetas were ordered by their father, Prachinibharishat, to marry and beget good progeny, to prepare themselves for the service, they all entered the sea and practiced austerities and penances for 10,000 years. Underwater, meditating underwater. No cheating. You can't just suspend the life air. No, if you breathe underwater, guess what? You're finished. So they didn't. And they worshiped the master of austerity, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So that's a summary. And here's a little bit of the detail. There's this green thing covering a lake, but behind the green thing, there's a lake that's going to be described. While traveling, the Prachetas happened to see a great reservoir of water by the sea. In that great lake, there were different types of lotus flowers, some bluish, some red, various trees and creepers, mad bumblebees humming around. On the shores, there were swans and cranes, chakravakas, karandavas, and other beautiful water birds. It's a nice scene. The trees appeared very jolly. These all created such an atmosphere that it appeared as though a festival was taking place there. And much to their surprise, not only they saw this beautiful scene of a lake, etc., but emerging from the lake was none other than Lord Shiva, along with his associates. And he came before the brothers. He became very pleased with them and instructed them in the transcendental science and the glories of Bhakti Yoga to the Supreme Lord. We mentioned this yesterday, but here it is again. This section, you see those verses at the bottom, it's commonly called Rudra Gita, or the Song of Lord Shiva. And what the essence of it is, glorification of the personality of Godhead and his devotional service. There's an image, a painting. You can count them. These number of brothers is 10. These are 10 sons of King Prachinibhari. Off they had gone to engage in austerities, and there's Lord Shiva, surrounded by different Gandharvas and other associates, as he's offering some nice instructions. There's another painting of the same scene. So one can just picture what's happening here. All the Prachetas, princes, simply remained in meditation within the water for 10,000 years while reciting these prayers. So it's stotras, or prayers, or Gita texts, and it's meditation upon the Supreme Personality of Godhead. With these mantras, they pray for the association of pure devotees, because by such association, one advances, becomes purified, and by the mercy of Bhakti Devi understands the Lord's name, form, and activities. That was chapter 24. And now, moving ahead, we're going to skip 25. So they're in the water doing their meditation and so forth. And Narada is going to go visit the king, their father, because he feels compassion. This king is one in the family line that he hasn't delivered yet. And this king, as we mentioned, he's an elevated person, but he's too much attached to fruitive activities, too much. So we're skipping the King Prachini Bari talk. We're going now to chapter 30. While they're underwater, as you see, standing at the bottom of the lake or sea, Lord Vishnu appeared before the Prachetas standing on the back of Garuda. He's got 8 arms, not just 4. Vishnu offered his benediction that they would marry Marisha. Now, he knew what they were there for. They were there to purify themselves, to become qualified to fulfill the instruction of their father. They didn't just run up and get married and have kids. They wanted to qualify to have proper offspring. Vishnu, knowing that, the purpose, he descended, pleased by their dedication to him, and he explained that the day would come when they would marry Marisha, who is the daughter of an Apsara named Pramlocha, and the sage Kandu. There's some story about this girl, Marisha. When she was born, she was left in the forest. Chandra, or the moon god, came before her and felt pity for her and allowed her to suck his thumb, through which she got nourishment and turned her, because Chandra is the god or demigod in charge of vegetation and trees and so forth. So he turned her, Marisha, over to the trees to care for. And after getting this benediction, the Prachetas offered very nice prayers to Lord Vishnu, and he departed. And after he departed, the Prachetas emerged from their meditation at the bottom of the lake or sea, and they saw that the earth was overgrown with wild trees because they were underwater for 10,000 years. Lots can happen on earth for 10,000 years. So they were concerned. There's no agricultural land. Everywhere there's trees and forests. So maybe you can look carefully and see where those flames are coming from. And there's 10 little guys. And they're like human torches. From their mouths came wind and fire, and they were burning the forest to the ground. And it was too much. So the moon god approached Brahma. Brahma came. Brahma requested, simply desist. Immediately they stopped, saying basically, your intention is okay, making agricultural land, but there's, you're burning the whole forest. So please stop. So they stopped. And then we'll see some images, Brahma, presented them with their wife, future wife, Marisha. As Vishnu had said, Brahma's presenting. There she is, there's Brahma and the Prachetas. Brahma appeared in front of the Prachetas, instructed them to desist, and offered them Marisha, the daughter of the Apsara, named Pramlocha, and the sage Kandu, who had been placed in the care of trees, the girl, and she was given as their wife by Brahma, and the Prachetas accepted. Now, later, this is 4th canto. We'll find in the 6th canto that this Marisha gave birth to Daksha. I call Daksha part 2. The same Daksha that was killed by Shiva and then given a goat's head after request of Brahma and so forth. So when he died, he took birth again as the daughter of the Prachetas and Marisha. That's 6th canto. There's another nice painting. There's the burnt forest in the background. There's the Prachetas. There's Brahma and Marisha. And they accepted her as their wife. That's next chapter 30. They ruled the kingdom for some time. And when the time was up, they had sons. Sons were ready to rule the kingdom. They turned the kingdom over to their sons. And they went to the forest to again engage in austerities and meditation. Nard found them there, and he instructed them in devotional service. That's chapter 31. And basically repeating or emphasizing the same that they had learned from Lord Shiva, because Lord Shiva taught devotional service. Nard is teaching devotional service. Hearing from Narada's mouth the glories of the Lord, which vanquish all the ill fortune of the world, the Prachetas also became attached to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Meditating on his lotus feet, they advanced to the ultimate destination. Now that was a quick gloss of that chapter 31. Here's chapter going back, because all this happened after King Prachinibari heard from Narada. So now, this is Narada's visiting the king, the father of the Prachetas. And he begins asking him some questions and then narrating an allegory. While the Prachetas engaged in austerities, their father, King Prachinibari, was engrossed in various, guess what? Fruitive sacrifices, karmakanda rituals. They are Vedic, but they were for the purpose of achieving worldly temporary things. So Narada Muni visited his palace and started asking him some questions. Of course, he was received very respectfully by the king. He's a very pious king. And Narada began to inquire, what do you desire to achieve by these fruitive activities? Please see in the sky those animals which you have sacrificed without compassion in the sky. They are all awaiting your death to pierce your body with iron horns. So, fruitive activities and rituals where animals are sacrificed, he's not encouraging them. Rather, he's going to narrate a very interesting allegory, and the allegory has a cast of characters. There's the stage. Got to hear a little recording here. What happened? No, it's just not, the sound isn't coming. It's not coming at all. Anyway, it's quite okay. It's just a ta-da-ta-da cast of characters. Try it again. You think what? No.
It's going to the display. So here now it will come from the system.
Okay, here we go. was worth it, right? Okay, here's the cast of characters, which we'll see a summary at the end. So you're going to hear their names, and at the end you're going to see who they represent, because it's an allegory. You younger people, you know what an allegory is? You know what an allegory is? It's a story that has a meaning. That's what an allegory. So we're going to hear the meaning later. These are just the names of the people in the story. Puranjana and his wife, Puranjani. Puranjana's friend. I'll give you a hint. Puranjana's friend is Supersoul. And Puranjana is the king himself, or a living entity, a jiva. And Puranjani is the material intelligence of the jiva. Puranjani's female attendants and Puranjani's male attendants, there are so many desires. The five-hooded serpent, that's the life air, the city guard. Chandavega, Chandavega's daughter, Jara, or Kala Kanya, the daughter of time. The daughter of time means death. The brothers, Bhaya and Prajvara. We'll hear more about them as we go along. Chandravega's soldiers, Vaidarbi, that's the king dies, Puranjana dies because he's attached to his wife. He becomes a female. Vidarbi is born the daughter of Vidarbha. So this is a drama or an allegory. So Narada is narrating the allegory. Once in the past there lived a king named Puranjana, who was celebrated for his great activities. He had a friend named Avijnata, the unknown one, that super soul. No one could understand the activities of Avijnata. There's the two. Puranjana traveled all over the world to find a suitable place to live, to fulfill his desires of or for sense enjoyment. So there's the two, riding on the back of an elephant. And there he eventually saw a city with 9 gates. City with 9 gates means the body that has 9 holes. We'll see shortly. So it's a city with 9 gates. The city was surrounded by walls and parks. Within it were towers, canals, windows, and outlets. The houses there were decorated with domes made of gold, silver, and iron. The floors of the houses in that city were made of sapphire, crystal, diamonds, floors, pearls, emeralds, and rubies. On the outskirts of that city were many beautiful trees and creepers encircling a nice lake. Also surrounding that lake were many groups of birds and bees that were always chanting and humming. And not only there's all this idyllic scenery, but there's a queen. In that city, Puranjana came across a beautiful woman, Puranjani. Reminder, she represents material intelligence of the living entity, because you need material intelligence to fulfill desires. She was accompanied by 10 servants, the 10 senses. Each servant had hundreds of wives. That's desires. She was always protected by a 5-hooded serpent, live here. Puranjana was attracted to her feminine features and asked her identity. My dear lotus-eyed, kindly explain to me, who are you? Where are you coming from? Whose daughter are you? You appear very chaste. What is the purpose of your coming here? What are you trying to do? Please explain all these things to me. All that's in one verse. Notice we're still in chapter 25. So she responds, I don't know my name or family. I only know that I am existing alone in this place today. She continued, all these men and women accompanying me are my friends. And the snake that always remains awake protects this city even during my sleeping hours. By great fortune, you have come here. You may live in this city for 100 years. I will arrange everything for your sense enjoyment. That's what material intelligence function is. Puranjana and Puranjani got married and lived in that city. Puranjana enjoyed with her and remained under her control, just like a pet animal. He begot many children and grandchildren who were virtually plunderers of his home, treasury, and so on. He was attached to them, and he became implicated with countless desires, conducted many sacrifices for prosperity and success of his material plans. So it sounds pretty good until the Gandharva king Chandavega came. 360 powerful soldiers, that's the days. 360 female companions, that's the nights. And they attacked the city of Puranjana. Death is coming. The five-hooded serpent defended the city and fought with the soldiers and gradually became very weak. You know, five-hooded, so there's 5 life ears that move through the body. So there's a 5-hooded serpent here. So life ears tried to check. Meanwhile, the daughter of Chandavega, that's death, named Jara or Kalakanya, was seeking her husband, but no one would accept her. She approached the king of the Yavanas, Bhaya, and requested him to marry her. He declined. Bhaya told Kalakanya to marry his brother, Prajvara, and proposed that they attack people together. So she went for it. Bhaya, Jara, Prajvara, and soldiers attacked Puranjana's city. Puranjana underwent great pain and became weak by the attack of Kalakanya. He lost his intelligence. He became anxious. Prajvara set fire to the entire city. Everyone suffered. The serpent, that's the 5-hooded serpent. You see the 5-hooded serpent there? The serpent became aggrieved and decided to leave the city. Life air left the body. Weakened by the Yavanas, Puranjana began to cry loudly. He's still alive, but life is slipping away. There's a bigger picture of the same. Puranjana was being forced to leave the city. Notice in the upper left is somebody with a hand. It looked like a cane in their hand. That's death. Being in ignorance, Puranjana couldn't remember his friend Abhigyata, that's super soul, his eternal friend and well-wisher. That's unfortunate if you don't remember Krishna at the time of death. Instead, you're going to think of something else. So he died remembering a woman at death. That was his wife. He's born as a woman in his next life, named Vaidarbi, the daughter of the king of Vidarbha. Interesting graphic to go with this. So there's Vidarbhi. It's King Puranjana in his next life as a woman, the daughter of the king Vidarbha. And she, Vidarbhi, marries another king, Malya Dwaja. She has 7 sons and daughters. After giving the kingdom to his sons, Malya Dwaja retires and begins worshiping Krishna. So she's left alone. He gives up his body eventually, and she wants to enter into the funeral pyre along with her husband. Now, suddenly, the scene changes. Just at that time, this unknown friend, Abhigyata, Puranjana's unknown eternal friend, suddenly appears. Abhigyata appears as a Brahmana, so you see the painting. There's a Brahmana, but it's actually super soul, and gives counsel to the woman, Vidarbhi. Who are you? Who is this man lying here? Don't you recognize me, your eternal friend, whom you consulted many times? Unfortunately, you gave up my company and accepted the position of an enjoyer of this material world. We both are like 2 swans living in the Manasa lake, or the heart, for thousands of years. Yet, you are far away from our original home, the spiritual world. Leaving me with material consciousness, you went to the earth, and wandering about, you saw a place, that's the city with 9 gates, the material body, created by a woman. The material intelligence, or a woman provides bodies. You enjoyed with that woman without hearing about knowledge of the self. And that's the Supreme Self, Krishna. Actually, you are not the daughter of Vidarbha. You're not the wife of Malya Dwaja, nor are you the husband of Puranjani. We both are pure spiritual entities, not different in quality. Maya causes you to think of yourself as a woman or as a man. Now, we've all heard this philosophy, so the story just is a very clever way, because Prachini Bari, the king, is too attached to just hear philosophy. You know, it's not that he doesn't know philosophy, he's just too attached. So he's hearing a story, because then he can pay attention to the story. And it's because of because of the influence of Maya and our attachment to the material energy, that we think of ourselves in terms of the material energy. Narada concluded, Puranjana was none other than the jiva, or the living entity. So, no music. Well, there's the music. That's the end of the drama. Now we're going to introduce you one by one to the characters. They're going to come on the stage here. There's Puranjana, that's the living entity. He takes a bow. And Puranjani, material intelligence. Then the friend, the super soul, Abhigyata. And Puranjani's male servants, mind and 10 senses, 100 wives of the male attendants, that's hundreds of desires. The 5-hooded serpent guard, that's the life force or life air. Chandavega is time, the destroyer. And Chandavega's daughter is old age, Kala Kanya, the daughter of time. Jara's husband, Prajvara, that's fever that comes at the time of death. Prajvara's brother is fear. Brother, sister. Fear and the fire at the time of death. Chandavega's 720 soldiers. That's time, the destroyer, day and night. And Vaidarbhi, that's the new body of Puranjana. So that's our cast of characters. And here's an illustration that appeared in Back to Godhead magazine when Dhruta Karma wrote an article for Back to Godhead magazine explaining what he calls the mind-body interaction. Because, you know, he's part of the Bhaktivedanta Institute, and the BI is interested in what's called the mind-body problem. So he just took, in his BTG article, took that theme or approach and wrote. So now we can see. Here's Chandavega. That's time that's entering into the gates. And his army of 360 days and 360 nights attacking. That's time attacking. Here's the 9 gates. 1 mouth, 2 ears, 2 nostrils, etc. So there's 9 gates, 9 holes in the body. Inside, there's the king. That's the jiva. There's the unknown friend, that's super soul. There's the 5-hooded serpent, that's life air. And there's the queen, Vidara Puranjani. So that's inside the city, or the body. Here's bodyguards. What it says here is the mind and 10 senses. This is what the 10 are. 5 knowledge acquiring, 5 working senses. Over here, these are the cities of sensation, 4 of them. There's more than 4. But so the sensation is through the sense organs. They enter into the body and will perceive things. So that's the city of 9 gates. It's a whole metaphor or allegory depicted in one graphic. The living entities are trying to, so he's now explaining. He goes through one by one, his whole long detailed description by Narada to the king, so he understands the allegory. The living entities are trying to counteract different miserable conditions pertaining to providence, other living entities, or the body and mind. Still, they must remain conditioned by the laws of nature, despite all attempts to counter these laws. So they're inescapable laws. The laws of nature you can't wiggle out of. They affect everybody. There's no escape from the material conditioning or material means of life. It's all futile. So he's summarizing to the king, who is too much attached to fruitive activities, what's the consequence of that attachment? A man may carry a burden on his head, and when he feels it to be too heavy, he sometimes gives relief to his head by putting the burden on his shoulder. In this way, he tries to relieve himself of the burden. However, whatever process he devises, to counteract the burden, does nothing more than put the same burden from one place to another. That's material life of mitigation of difficulties. Difficulties come because it's due to us. You try to shift it, and it just, that's all it does. It changes position. O King, all good fortune unto you. The mind is the cause of the living entities attaining a certain type of body in accordance with his association with material nature. The mind. According to one's mental composition, one can understand what the living entity was in the past life, as well as what kind of body he will have in the future. Thus, the mind indicates the past and future bodies. That's an image showing somebody's mind. It's got a lot of stuff going on. As long as there exists the subtle material body composed of intelligence, mind, senses, sense objects, and the reactions of the material qualities, the consciousness of false identification and its relative objective, the gross body, exists as well. Now that's not graffiti on a wall, that's somebody's mind going all over the place. The real interest of the living entity is to get out of the nescience that causes him to endure repeated birth and death. The only remedy is to surrender to the Supreme Personality of Godhead through his representative. There's his representative. Unless one renders devotional service unto the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Vasudeva, one cannot possibly become completely detached from this material world. Nor can he possibly manifest real knowledge. Our founder Acharya is a great place of shelter and compassion. So, another image, moving continuously during his lifetime to bring this opportunity to so many. Hearing all this leads to seeing the Lord, my dear King, in the place where pure devotees live, following the rules and regulations, and thus purely conscious and engaged with great eagerness in hearing and chanting the glories of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. In that place, if one gets a chance to hear their constant flow of nectar, which is exactly like waves of a river, one will forget the necessities of life, namely hunger and thirst, and become immune to all kinds of fear, lamentation, and illusion. We're almost done. We're almost done. Just a few more slides. This is a painting that's showing these final chapters. Starting over there in the upper left, that's chapter 24. That's Lord Shiva visiting the Prachetas and giving them his prayers. 25, that's the city of 9 gates. 26 is the city's being attacked. 27 is the serpent with hoods is doing his best, but he gets fatigued. 28 is the king becomes a woman in his next life. And 29 is Narada explaining all of this. And then 30, that's the Prachetas emerging out of the lake and burning the forest. They stop. They get a queen by whom they can produce good children. And the final chapter, 31, is they get instructions from Narada. So after telling the allegory of King Puranjana, Narada requests King Prachini Parishat to give up material attraction and take to devotional service. Later, Narada preaches to the Prachetas. So That's 29. Later he preaches to the Prachetas. 31. At the end of their lives. So what happens to the king after he hears all this? That's the king, by the way. He became a Vaishnava. In the presence of his ministers, the saintly king Prachini Bari left orders for his sons, after they come out of the lake, for his sons to protect the citizens. He then left home and went off to undergo austerities in a holy place known as Kapilashrama. Now, it doesn't say where it is, because we know one of the places where Kapila is way at the bottom of the universe. But we don't know where, it could have been another place at this time. Having undergone austerities and penances at Kapilashram, King Prachini Bari attained full liberation from all material designations. He constantly engaged in the transcendental loving service of the Lord and attained a spiritual position qualitatively equal to that of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Yay, victory for King Prachini Bari. And that ends Canto 4. And we're falling at the feet of our founder Acharya, who gave us these wonderful teachings and the Bhaktivedanta purports. And stay tuned for the coming attractions this evening. The king, the deer, and the Brahmana, that's Bharat Maharaj, became a deer, became a Brahmana. That's what we're going to be discussing this evening. So we just covered 7 chapters. It wasn't so painful. It was kind of nice. And some feedback that I'm getting from people who are participating in these discussions, particularly the remote people, some local people also saying specifically, as they're going through in their reading groups, refined way, this verse and that purport and so forth, they're not getting the big picture as this is attempting to do, give the big picture. So the detail is very wonderful, and the big picture is helpful. The essence is in the detail, the Bhaktivedanta purports, and then further commentaries of acharyas and so forth and so on. But this is just to give in 4 sessions we covered Canto 4. How many sessions of your Bhagavatam reading groups is going to take to cover Canto 4? Probably a couple of months. But there's the big picture. So it puts things in context. And one of the appreciations is how skilled and how flexible and how expert is Narada Muni. He knows exactly what to do with each person, and it's a little different each time, or very different each time. It's one of the few places in the whole Bhagavatam that it's explicitly allegorical. The rest of the Bhagavatam is explicitly historical. And this is one place where it's explicitly, by design, to help the king who's too much attached. When somebody's too much attached, we've all had experience, when somebody's too much attached, gosh, you can talk to you blue in the face and they're not paying attention. It doesn't go anywhere. Now, it's not every time we need to tell allegories to such people, but Narada knows when, and he certainly has the Shakti, not only tells a nice story, but he has the spiritual potency to carry the two so attached, he can't just hear, you're not this body, and let go. In the morning sessions, we're hearing Krishna's really direct, like super direct, powerfully direct with Uddhava, but Uddhava's not like King Prachini Bari. So, depending upon who you're with, how do you present Krishna consciousness to people? It depends on the audience. We had this discussion just last night. There was one young man asking the question, how do you help newer people, like people in my workplace or people like that, that don't really accept, we're millennials and we're not like the older generation people and we need things customized for our age group, and so how do you do that? And the answer I gave is, have them tune in to the morning class that's broadcast from the Bhakti Center at 6:30 in the morning or whatever it is, or they have a recording of it that comes, and they have an audience of 3,000 people. And it's mostly young Western people. There's some, of course, some of other than Western, but they're just reading the Bhagavatam, but they're explaining it in a way that younger generation people can understand. And they got quite an audience. I've met some of the people that attend their class every day. Now, I don't know if they attend it live because it's really early in the morning, especially if you're not in East Coast time. But in the course of the day, the average, from what I've understood, is 3,000 people hear that class. And it's not, older generation people, it's younger generation people. That's just one example. There's other examples. There's all kinds of other podcasts and this and that going on for young people that are reaching young people. Because the principles don't change with time. How you package it and express it and explain it can be, in different language. Similar to what Prabhupada did. He was addressing a certain generation, and prior, let's say, Bhaktivinoda Thakur, he was addressing a different generation. And prior to him, the Goswamis of Vrindavan were addressing a different generation, a different mindset, different cultural norms, and so forth. These days, anyway, yesterday somebody sent me a photo. It looks like it's been photoshopped, but it's a photo of Prabhupada. And he had a little mustache. And then I showed that to somebody and they sent back a photo of Bhaktivinoda Thakur, also photoshopped, because the color shows the color of his eyes and everything. They didn't have that kind of technology, but through Photoshop, it's Bhaktivinoda when he was young, in his 20s, little mustache. And today, the podcast guys, they all have these beards. And before that, it was long hair. Before that, it was short hair. And, so things may change externally, but principles don't change. And how things are expressed and communicated can change. Anyway, allegories are nice, whatever your age is. You're trying to understand how this means this personality is expressing this force, time, Chandavega. And Chandavega, time destroys everything. But there's some things that are eternal. And there's eternal principles of consciousness and elevation of consciousness. And I'll say this one last thing. There certainly are themes that repeat themselves in different ways in the Bhagavatam. Sadhu Sangha. Don't be attached to the temporary. Bring your attention to the eternal, and an obstacle is the attachment to the temporary, so pay attention to detachment to the temporary so that you can become attached to the eternal. There's themes that repeat themselves. And of course, different persons respond differently to hearing those themes. Fortunately, although King Prachinibari was too much attached, he was actually a very elevated person. It reminds me of Dhritarashtra, not the same, of course, but Dhritarashtra was actually a very elevated person. When he got it, like he's at the fag end of life, and his dear younger brother, who he looked up to anyways already, he just couldn't follow because he was too attached. But, you know, Duryodhana is gone, and his 99 other sons are gone, and his teeth are falling out, and his liver isn't working, and, you know, the whole thing's about to explode. And his brother speaks really powerfully. So what does he do? He goes to the forest, and he knows this Ashtanga Yoga process. That's the same as sati. His body just bursts into flame from meditation. No matches and gasoline. It's just like, he's a very capable person. No, that's not ordinary. He's not an ordinary person. He's not just an ordinary attached person. It took quite a while. So it can take quite a while for us too. We're not like diabolical and conspiring to kill our relatives and so forth, or our enemies and things like that. But attachment is very strong, and so it comes again and again. Strong advice, let go. Let go. And when you let go, grab hold of the lotus feet of Krishna through the association of devotees, and through the association of devotees means hearing messages about the personality of Godhead, and hearing it not just sometimes or in a 7-day katha, but hearing it nityam bhagavata sevaya, regularly, daily. That's our instruction. And it's very powerful. So let's see if there's some discussion. Here we are, it's 12:35. What we've been doing is, if anybody in the room would kindly ask a question, it gives people who are remote time to send in a question by text message. So if anybody would like, you can gladly give you the microphone.
How did Krishna get born? Because there was like nobody around.
What's the question?
How did Krishna appear, or how did he take birth? There was nobody before him.
There's nobody around him?
Mm-hmm.
Well, yes, there was. You say there's nobody around him, but there were people around him. Krishna appeared after the universe was already put together and people were doing stuff. Vasudeva and Devaki were around, and a whole lot of other people around.
She meant Hare Krishna Maharaj. She meant in the spiritual world.
In the spiritual world.
Yeah, so she
But
said,
it doesn't come in, he's not born in the spiritual world. He's eternal. You got it? He's not born. He's always there, and the place is always there.
Oh,
Now, do you know there's no such thing in this world.
okay.
So you're comparing this world to the spiritual world, but you have to hit the delete button. And that doesn't come into being. Krishna is eternally there in the spiritual world. There's no beginning, middle, and end. It's eternal.
Okay.
Different. Altogether different.
thank you Maharaj. And this, it's just appreciation Maharaj, the whole class. We were reading Prithu Maharaj story for 3 months almost, actually, chapter by chapter. And this whole, this class is like what we are going to read in future. So it's really exciting for the entire, this whole group is our Bhakti Ruksha Bhagavata reading group here. So they are all looking forward for this coming up chapters.
Well, the Prithu was yesterday. It's recorded, I'm sure. And so if your group wants on their own leisure or together or whatever.
Yeah, it would be a nice summary for us. Too.
Yeah.
So go back and
Having completed it, now here's the review.
yes, Maharaj. Thank you.
Okay.
Kids, the session, like, all the kids are here if they wanted to ask what the questions they have, or should we only ask the questions that are in the...
Anything at all. It's out of context, in context, whatever. On topic, off topic, I'm fine.
Why Krishna loves butter every time?
Why Krishna does what?
Why Krishna loves butter every time?
Why Krishna wants butter every time?
Yeah.
Well, he likes other things too, but he has his favorite. How about you? You have your favorite? I mean, you particularly like and particularly don't like certain things. So Krishna's like that. He has his favorite. He likes other things too. But, very dear to him are cows, and from cows come milk, and from milk come so many milk products. So he does, yogurt and butter and cream and milk sweets. We're going to distribute some milk sweets a little bit later. So anything, because he really likes cows. And cows like him, and he liked what comes from the cows. Okay.
Hare Krishna, Guruji. So Guruji, one question, Prabhuji, one question about the material natures. It's so attached towards it. So how to redirect them towards the spiritual? I mean, every material nature has its own spirituality. Now, how to understand that spirituality and redirect that material attachment towards the spiritual?
Are you asking for yourself or you're asking for your daughter?
For myself.
Okay, because I was going to say...
I'm too selfish. So
because that's where it starts. If you do, then it sets an example for those who are looking up to you and in relationship with you. Well, keeping it simple, it's two main things. Sambandha Gyan, that's seeing the relationship of things to their source. And since things come from their source, they're the property of that source, and therefore, the next is, they're meant for being brought in connection with the source. So, a flower. And one can try to be the enjoyer of it, or give the flower to a loved one, or give the flower to Krishna, and then give the flower to a loved one, or enjoy the beauty of the flower or the fragrance of the flower or something. So it's Sambandha Gyan and then Bhakti. You connect those things which are of a source with the source. It's meant for being enjoyed by the source. What do you think? Supposing I asked you, when I come to your home, I have an attachment to steal stuff from your home and take it home with me. And I know it's not right because it belongs to you. So what should I do? And you might say, well, you can have it, it's okay with me. But for teaching character, recognize that it's the property of the person who owns it, and it should be used in relation to the person who owns it. So that's Krishna's teaching to us. There's Sambandha Gyan, and then you can say karma yoga or connecting things back to their source with love. Then how do you develop that knowledge and how do you develop that feeling of love? That's the science of the practice or the cultivation of Bhakti Yoga, the offering things with love to Krishna. Another way to answer your question is chapters 7 through 12 answer your question. Because the last verse of chapter 6, Krishna says to Arjuna, the next to last verse, he says, so many instructions, but by all means, Arjuna, be a yogi. And of all yogis, the one that's the best yogi is the one who, with their mind and their body, they do certain things. With their mind attached to me, with their body engaged in worshiping me and offering loving service, that's the highest of yoga. Now I'm going to explain to you how to. That's how chapter 7 begins. I'm going to explain how to. So your question is how to. Read chapter 7 through 12, Bhagavad Gita. You get the how to.
Thanks.
Okay?
Haripul Maharaj.
Hi, Krishna.
So, when we chant with devotion, Krishna eventually starts to test us to see if it's true devotion. Could we, so my question is, could we take those good things that happened and also chant with devotion?
Yeah. Yeah.
That works?
Well, whatever helps you bring, if I've understood your question correctly, whatever helps you bring your mind to the sound, do it. If it's something is drawing your attention away from the sound, be cautious. Have the brake pedal and the steering wheel in your hand. Maybe move over this way a little bit. But anything that helps you bring your mind to the sound, because the sound of Krishna's name is Krishna. It's very natural. Does that answer your question? So some people, there's many things people do to try to help bring the mind to the sound. A picture, a deity, the mantra itself, sometimes putting a blindfold on and, just blocking out the senses and just focusing the sound. Some people put their hand over their ears. Some people put, sound mufflers so they can, hear any sound or of anything. Whatever works to help bring your mind to the sound. At different times, different things are going to seem more effective, and do you do that, whatever that is? Does that answer your question? Good.
Thank you.
Now, I know there was an idea that I was going to come a little bit earlier and have some interaction with the young people, but it didn't work out with my schedule. So my apology to those of you that were looking forward to that, especially Sumangala was really looking forward to that.
Some of the kids did not come on, but maybe next time we could get an opportunity.
Okay, it was not possible. Anyone else? Okay.
As Krishna has no beginning ending because he always has only the spiritual body, how to understand his body when he is born in Dwapara Yuga?
His question is
I'll read it.
one side we are saying Krishna does not have a beginning and ending in the spiritual,
Got it?
but again he is appearing in the.
Oh, well, eternally, back to our first question over here, Krishna exists eternally. And the material world is periodically created, maintained, and withdrawn, and then it's not there. And then again, it's created and maintained and withdrawn. Then again, it's not there. Then again, so it happens in cycles. And sometimes from the spiritual world, Krishna appears in this temporary world. He's not born. He just appears. And he appears in such a way, it may look to some people like he's taking birth like you and I did. But he's not, he's just appearing. And then stays for some time, does some activity, transcendental activity, and then disappears. Are you paying attention? You follow? Okay. Let's go and see if they have something online. Okay, fine.
Hare Krishna Maharaj. I have a question regarding Lord Shiva. It's like we have references for Lord Sri Krishna in Bhagavad Gita and various other places that he is the supreme and there is no beginning and ending. But with respect to creation, where does Shiva come into picture? Like, is he like one of the Guna avatars? Or
yes, he's one of the Guna avatars.
So that is the beginning.
That has a beginning and an end.
Oh, okay. So is he eternal or is he also eternal?
It's complex. There are different features or aspects of Lord Shiva, and some of them are and some of them are not. How's that for a complicated answer? Because Shiva Tattva is very difficult to understand. And there are different abodes of Lord Shiva. The original abode of Lord Shiva is Shada Shiva Loka, that's in Vaikuntha. That's eternal.
Okay.
Then there's Shiva Loka, that's beyond the material universe. And his feature is not the same as in the Vaikuntha realm. And then there's a residence or an abode of Lord Shiva in Mount Kailash. That's in this created realm. And that's not eternal. He's manifest and then withdrawn. And there's others. Mahakalapur, Mahakala means the destruction, Mahakala. And the 11 Rudras, they reside at the bottom of the universe. So when it's time for devastation, flames come from Anantashesha and the Rudras dance and the flame goes up. So they're not eternal. It's not, a bucket. It's very complex in Shiva Tattva.
Okay.
Because he has different services. One thing is for sure, in all situations, his mood is that of a servant of the Supreme. He's not supreme, he's the servant of the Supreme. And in some aspects or features of him, they're eternally manifest and some are not.
Okay. Thank you, Maharaj.
Sanchari's question. When hearing the story of Marisha and the Prachetas, I was reminded of Draupadi and her 5 husbands. Is there a connection between the two? Is there any backstory to how Marisha married the Pracheta similar to Draupadi's benediction in her past life that led to her marriage with the Pracheta?
I had a similar question, researched it, and could find no explanation by commentators explaining a connection, other than it's one of those most unusual situations where one woman has more than one husband.
This is from Gopal Krishna Das Prabhu. From Srimad Bhagavatam 3:9-38, he quotes, O Brahma, the prayers that you have chanted praising the glories of my transcendental activities, the penances you have undertaken to understand me, and your firm faith in me, all these are to be considered my causeless mercy. How do we get the causeless mercy of the Lord?
Well, it's causeless. Your question, in one sense, your question is counterintuitive. Because if it's causeless, then there isn't a cause. So how do you get, what's the cause of that which is causeless? That's not the language of your question, but that's what your question is. So there's no cause to causeless. But another answer is the causeless mercy of the Lord comes through the distributors of his causeless mercy. That's his representatives. And if you want a really nice explanation of this, a little more detail, you can read Madhurya Kandambini, where the question is chapter 1. Madhurya Kandambini is a book written by Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, and chapter 1 starts, or a major part of that chapter is, how does bhakti begin? Well, you can say it's by causeless mercy. He says, well, if it's causeless mercy, then we should expect that everybody's got it, because it's causeless, like the sun shines everywhere. There's got to be another. So without all the, for Gopal Krishna, the answer is the causelessly merciful person, Krishna, gives power of attorney to his devotee, specifically his Madhyama Bhakta, who says, you have power of attorney, you can give me to whoever you like. And then the Madhyama Bhakta has some injunctions and prohibitions. Vidis and nishetas, things to do and things not to do. And the Madhyama is to give Krishna Bhakti to people who are innocent. Like Narada could give Krishna Bhakti even to a hunter or to a dacoit, Ratnakar, before he was Valmiki. So Narada is in another category, but one gets the causeless mercy of the Supreme through the mercy of his representative. And generally speaking, we get that mercy through the Madhyama. That is, someone who's not at the topmost, but someone who's at least in the function of one who's in this middle position. That's it. Okay. He's a teenager, by the way. Anything back there? No? Okay, looks like we're done. Anything? No? Yes? No? Srila Prabhupada ki? Jai.